Time now for the injury report. It's being brought to you by Cape Regional Health Systems and Dr. Kevin McHale. Cape Regional Health Systems and Penn Orthopedics, the best of both worlds for a healthier life. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit us at caperegional.com/orthopedics. Dr. Kevin McHale will be with us throughout the football season. And, of course, as he told us last week, was an assistant team physician for the New England Patriots, among other pro sports teams. And he's here with us now to take a look at some of the major injuries this week. Dr. Kevin McHale is back. Dr. McHale, how are you?
Great. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again.
We got it. And, we didn't want to have a major injury to have to discuss just 2 weeks into our discussions here, but we got one right off the bat. And if you saw Ronald Darby's ankle injury, it looked gruesome on television. He has been diagnosed with a dislocated right ankle. X-rays came back negative. A lot of people thought it looked like a season ender, but it sounds like only 4 to 6 weeks. So what did you see there? And he seems like he got out pretty lucky on this one.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you that he got out lucky. When I saw that, I was the first one to kind of call out to my friends and family that I thought he broke his ankle and dislocated it and he'd be done for the season. But it sounds like he really dodged a bullet. And when we're typically talking about that type of deformity to an ankle, we picture the foot that dislocates out to the side. It typically breaks part of the lower tibia and fibula with it as it dislocates out. Somehow he was able to miss that, and I think part of the reason could be there's kind of two scenarios that could have happened to him. One is it's possible to only tear the ligaments on the left and right side of the ankles to allow that dislocation to happen, but that's actually very, very rare because typically the bone will break at the same time. The more likely is that he may have actually dislocated at a level slightly lower than the ankle joint. Although they refer to it as an ankle joint, it's very close to it. And it's below the bone that fits right underneath the tibia, which is called your talus. So it's called the subtalar dislocation. And in these cases, the foot dislocates out underneath that bone in a similar manner, and it looks the same, but actually on X-ray it would look different. And although they can have associated fractures as well, oftentimes this is purely a ligamentous injury, or just once it's reduced, it's pretty stable, and it can heal well with non-operative management. If he had a typical fracture dislocation of that ankle, we're looking at surgery to fix the break, and not season ending for sure, or at least an extended recovery period. But with this injury, oftentimes after a period of an immobilization in that boot that you see him walking around on, and then gradual rehab, you should be able to get back pretty soon.
Yeah, it sounds like he dodged a bullet here, and a lot of it, sometimes, Doc, you hear, it's better if you break your ankle than if you sprain it. You hear those high ankle sprains, and sometimes they can be 4 to 6 weeks, if not longer. How come that is the case, that a break is sometimes better than a sprain?
Well, when they talk about that, they're usually referring to the high ankle sprain, which is kind of a different animal. We actually did a study back with the Patriots looking at all combine athletes, just looking at what types of injuries they had. And over 50% of combine players had injuries to their ankle, but 80% of them are sprains. They're incredibly common. And most of them are the low ankle sprain, where we're just talking about injuring the outside ligaments to the ankle. And oftentimes, players rarely miss significant time. They're able to tape up their ankles, get back to play pretty quickly with some rehab. The high ankle sprain is a different story because you're talking about the ligaments that stabilize this joint between your tibia and your fibula. And when the force is enough that not only do you injure the outside of the ankle, but that force travels up the lower leg and through that joint, it can be very painful. And it takes much more time for that to heal. And those are the kind of injuries that can linger over time if not properly rehabbed. So, sometimes we always talk about bone-to-bone healing. It's very, once it's fixed and healed, it tends to not bother them down the line. But these other soft tissue injuries tend to linger a little bit more.
So 4 to 6 weeks sounds about right. Is that something you think he'll have any lingering effects, or should he be back 4 to 6 weeks ready to go?
Actually with these, if it is in fact a subtalar dislocation, once they're reduced, they're fairly stable, and as long as he has that, that time to be immobilized and allow it to heal, it shouldn't really be much of a problem going forward. It's actually not very unstable afterwards. Recurrent instability is unlikely, but sometimes they'll actually have some stiffness, which is kind of contrary to what you think, because he dislocated his foot there. But they'll work all that out with physical therapy, and hopefully this shouldn't be a problem that lingers any further. And I think a 6-week timeline does seem pretty appropriate for it.
All right, Dr. Kevin McHale, Cape Regional Medical with us here, a former assistant team physician for the New England Patriots dealing with football injuries. Caleb Sturgis, the kicker, hip flexor injury. In fact, they went for 2 because he couldn't kick, although he did kick off after that, after the opening kickoff on Sunday. He's expected to be out at least 4 weeks. They put him on the injured reserve list, though, so that means he'll have to sit out at least 8 weeks with this hip flexor. Kind of explain to us, obviously with a kicker, that hip area would be a big problem, but the timetable on that.
Yeah, so in general, when we're talking about hip flexor injuries, we're talking about the iliopsoas muscle, which is a muscle that provides the primary force to hip flexion. You have some others that contribute as well. And, hip injuries in general are much less common in our football players, but kickers, that's not the case, obviously, because the force that they generate both on their plant leg and their kicking leg as well. When they did a study looking at these hip flexor strains on NFL athletes, and typically a lot of them would be able to get back fairly quickly, 1 to 3 weeks, but when you're looking at kickers, they tended to last at least a month before they were able to get back from these injuries just because of the nature of the demands of their position. So I think the 4-week timelines were kind of right on par for where it could most likely would have been. It might have taken a little longer. Obviously, sometimes decisions regarding the team's roster play a bigger role in deciding whether or not somebody's going to go on IR. So that likely contributed in that respect. But, hopefully he'll have plenty of time to recover. And if they do bring him back, he'll be ready to go.
All right, big one here for the fantasy players out there. Probably a lot of people's number 1 pick in fantasy football. David Johnson, 2 to 3 months after undergoing surgery to repair a dislocated wrist. They said they're hoping to get him back around Christmas time, but similar to Darby there, dislocation. But this is in the wrist area. That sounds pretty painful.
Yeah, so, unlike what sounds like Ronald Darby dodging a bullet, David Johnson did not. And the interesting thing is, these type of wrist injuries, you don't see that when you saw him walking off the field. He didn't have a significant deformity about the wrist, not like when we saw Darby carted off. And a lot of times, these things actually can be missed when they first get x-rays if they don't look close enough. But these injuries are very unstable. So even if he gets an appropriate reduction or where they set it back in place, put him in a nice well-padded cast or splint, they tend to still dislocate. And as a result, they need to have surgery almost always to get these fixed. And I know he's scheduled to have surgery today, and typically, depending on the pattern of the injury, whether there's associated fractures, they'll have to fix those fractures. If it's only purely ligamentous, they repair the ligaments, and then they will put some type of combination of pins and screws to maintain the alignment so that way it doesn't redislocate. And he'll be in a cast for a while and then have extensive rehab after that. When looking at players that had this type of injury getting back to play, almost all NFL athletes with this injury lost some motion in the wrist, and they lost some strength. But, the vast majority of them got back to playing. And fortunately for David Johnson, it is his wrist, and it's not a lower extremity injury, so hopefully he'll be able to get back to the same level of performance because, he is a phenomenal player, whether he plays for the Eagles or not. He's exciting to watch. Absolutely.
Today's injury report with Dr. Kevin McHale, brought to you by Cape Regional Health Systems and Dr. Kevin McHale, Cape Regional Health Systems and Penn Orthopedics, the best of both worlds for a healthier life. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit caperegional.com/orthopedics. Kevin McHale, a former team physician, assistant team physician with the New England Patriots, dealt with a lot of pro football injuries, and there's the latest on a couple of key injuries this week in the NFL. Thanks, Doc. Have a great week.
All right, great. Thank you very much for having me again. I'll talk to you guys soon.